This week on the latest episode of a special edition of The Big Show, we lost arguably one of my favorite artists and one of the most influential artists of the absolute 20th century when Quincy Jones transitioned earlier this week. We're going to discuss his legacy, his top 10 musical scores, and a bunch of other information about the man they simply called Q, or the Dude. In addition to that, we got a couple of movies that we need to review this weekend, including Blitz and Luther Vandross, Never Too Much. We'll have all that and more on the latest episode of Keeping It Real with Film Gordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with Film Gordon. I am Tim Gordon. This is Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, it's a dark day in the Republic, brother. That's all I can tell you. It's a dark, dark day in the Republic, man. But we are going to do what we do from an entertainment standpoint, man, and hopefully lift somebody's spirit that's out there today. But Charles, how you doing today, bro?
I have a prepared statement I'd like to read. Throughout the number of years that I have experienced great highs and great lows, and it comes with great sadness and joy, a combination of both, where I must recognize the um, the work that has been done lately in an organization that has languished for a number of years. And so I'm saying now that I'm conceding greatness upon Adam Peters for drafting, having Marshawn Lattimore, excuse me, join the team of the Washington Commanders. I concede to him as a great general manager. I will leave it alone from now on. He's the man.
All right. Okay. I, see, the thing that's interesting about what you just heard, and of course, I'm furious with Charles because again, we're doing an entertainment show, right? And I can understand if you had a statement politically, really. I mean, this show is played around the world. Nobody cares about what's going on with. I don't talk about my teams. Why are you talking about your? Literally, I mean, really? When have I talked about my teams?
Especially when your team is facing my team, we've had many discussions on the show.
Okay. All right, man. We got a good show today. I apologize for Charles Kirkland mucking up the waters with some ridiculous, which made it even worse because I have a prepared statement, but he didn't read it. It's just ridiculous, man. But welcome to the show today.
I mean, would you
Let's
expect any less from me? Would you expect any less from me?
literally I was expecting more than less, but you went underground on me this time. I was never mind. We have a good show today. The only thing, and I shared this with Charles before the show started, that this would be the one time that I wish we could include some actual music on the show without us getting in trouble with our streaming partners who will put the kibosh on it. We could probably do it and you could hear it one time, but there would be no point of doing it if we couldn't have that show be repeated over and over. But this is a really huge show, and I'm really excited to talk about the legacy of a man whose work I've respected for so long. I worked in radio for a dozen years, and I remember I had an opportunity one time to actually meet him when he put out his autobiography. And he came up to Howard University, and I was there and kind of crossed paths with him when he autographed my book. Quincy Jones, man, my God. What I was talking to Charles beforehand. What a career. What a life. Quincy Jones. What impact that he put into 91 years of work. The amount of talent, the amount of music, the amount of we throw these words around like legend and icon. I mean, I was sharing with Charles, Quincy Jones, for people who don't know, He learned how to play the trumpet. His first trumpet teacher was Miles Davis when he was like 12, right? A couple of years after that, he meets a young blind kid in Seattle named Ray Charles, and they had a lifelong friendship. His first gig on the road was with Lionel Hampton. Now, if you're young and you don't know any of these names, they got this thing called Google. Just Google what I'm telling you right now. Um, he becomes the first in the mid 60s or early 60s. He becomes the first black person to be a music executive. I forget the name of the company, but he came to the fame with this young lady. You might be familiar with her. Her name is Leslie Gore. Charles, it's my party. I'll cry if I want to. What else did Leslie Gore make?
Judy's turn to cry. You don't own me. Uh, just a lot of things. Yeah.
Right. So,
Hits.
so
Hits.
yeah, hits. And then after that, he decided that hey, maybe I'll just score some films. And he went on to do like 35 of them, and a lot, the top 10 we'll talk about, but some of the standouts and stuff like In the Heat of the Night, The Pawnbroker. He did the score for Roots. There's a couple of songs, like I'll name them. You don't know these songs by these titles, but when I tell you what shows they're associated with, you'll go, oh, yeah. So there was this song that I love that's probably one of the most popular and recognizable tunes from Quincy Jones, simply called The Street Sweeper. You know what the Street Sweeper is, right? If you don't
Yes, I
know at
absolutely
home,
do.
yeah, if you don't know
Absolutely.
at home what the Street Sweeper is, you ever heard of this show called Sanford and Son? That's the theme of Sanford and Son. He has another song, and I'm looking at the album. It's called Smackwater Jack, which funny to me. But Smackwater Jack has two songs on it that are themes. One, again, they don't even have a title for this one. It's simply just called The Theme from Ironside, which, if you didn't watch Ironside, but you watched Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill, you've heard
Right.
Quincy Jones's songs. You've heard his music. Charles talks about soul bossa nova. I mean, Quincy Jones, the stuff
Wait,
he
wait,
roots in the heat of the night. I mean, dude,
wait, but you buried it. I mean, Soul Bossa Nova. If you've watched any Austin Powers movie, that's the song, the theme song that you hear in the spy comedy. That's his song.
Quincy Jones, man. So you notice in all the stuff we're talking about, we haven't touched on, he worked with Frank Sinatra. And not when I say he worked with Frank Sinatra, he was Frank Sinatra's backing band in the 60s, right? So all those his Luck Be a Lady, that's cute. An amazing video, and I put it up a couple of days ago when we found out about his passing. And I don't remember what song it is, but they did a special version of the song where Frank shouts out all of Quincy's band, right? Quincy's got me in here swinging with George Quincy Quincy Jones, bruh. I know we say this a lot, Charles. I know we do when we say somebody's a one of one, dude. Quincy Jones, man. And again, it's funny because I was at church on Sunday, and my pastor said, that sometimes we get into these traps where we start to look down or look over, and we start to compare ourselves with somebody else. There's simply no comparison, bro. I don't know of anybody like Charles and I were talking earlier. Who currently, as an African American, is somebody who's scoring a lot of movies right now? We only came up with one name. Who did we come up with?
Chris Bowers, I think, was the only
Chris,
name we
Chris
could think of.
Bauer. And Chris Bauer might have done. I'll be generous. He might have done 4 movies. Quincy did 35. But in addition to doing movies, Quincy was scoring television. Quincy was making jazz albums. Quincy was making pop albums. And when I say Quincy was making pop albums, take Michael Jackson and just put him to the side for a second. Because before Michael Jackson, there might be this guy named George Benson. Remember this? George Benson came to Quincy Jones, I want to say it was 1980. And George Benson had just come off of, Breezing, right? Breezing was huge in
Oh
1970.
yeah.
huge album. You know, the title song, Breezin'. I forget there's a couple other jams on Breezin', but Breezin' was like huge. He goes to Quincy Jones, and Quincy was like, "Oh, that's your album? Oh, hold on a second, hold my beer. I'm gonna get you an album. I'm gonna make you another album." He made an album. I don't know if the name of the album is "Give Me the Night," but I know "Give Me the Night" was the big song on there. Moody's Mood.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh my God, man, Quincy Jones, bruh. He had a it's funny, and I'm gonna stop in a second, Charles, but I just watched for the first time Pharrell's Piece by Piece, right? And brilliant, brilliant documentary done in Lego. Has a bunch of tells Pharrell's story, right? And you think about how prolific Pharrell is, right? And what he did. But the reason I bring Pharrell's movie up is that Pharrell talked about how when he discovered at a very early age that he would listen to music, but music didn't just come through his ears. He could see the colors of music, right? And I don't know
Hmm.
if Q had that, but Quincy Jones just understood music in a way that a lot of people understand, but Q had an advanced knowledge of music at a really, really early age. And you go back and listen, and I just talked about George Benson, right? I remember even before somebody told me what it was, I remember listening to Love Times Love one time, which is on that album. And I remember isolating, like not listening to Benson singing, but just listening to everything that was going on behind it. And I'm hearing drums, I'm hearing congos and shakers, and I'm like, what? And somebody said, oh, that's called layering the music. Quincy Jones was excellent at layering music, right? So there's a story that I saw yesterday, Charles, that Michael Jackson famously came to Quincy Jones on Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, I guess, when he was doing Off the Wall. And he was like, I don't, I didn't want to do Michael's voice, but he was like, I don't like those violins on the front of the song. Can you take those violins off? And Quincy said, absolutely not. We're not taking those violins off. And when you hear it now, when you hear, "Na, na, 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 na," that's the violin. Q just had an advanced knowledge and understanding of production that he brought to everything. Watch this. This we talked earlier this year when we were at Sundance about this documentary of this song, USA for Africa. Remember this? We Are the
Yeah.
World. Quincy Jones, again, all those people that were on that song, it was Quincy Jones, remember? Who was the one
Yep.
who said, you are over here, you over there.
Check your
Dude,
egos at the
get the
door.
ego to the right. Look, Charles. There's no school that teaches you how to hear music. You know what elements to add. It's a singular sort of a situation. And when we talk about, like, you look over my shoulder, you see young and old Quincy. Quincy Jones was I wrote a post. I called him the master orchestrator. He's the master orchestrator. This dude, man, produced Oscars, Super Bowls. Like, what didn't Quincy do? What didn't he do? Charles, go ahead, man. You take it. What did Quincy do?
Um, Quincy doesn't have a Tony Award. That's the only thing that you can say. He's got everything else, but he doesn't have a Tony. So I mean but I mean, yeah, his discography, everything that he's done, just fantastic. And like you said, nobody has produced. Now you talked about Chris Bowers. Chris Bowers has 56 credits to his work, and I mean he's done a lot of work, but none of them is as prolific as what and stands the test of time like what Quincy Jones has done. Quincy Jones, Quincy Jones was so good that there was this song that came out in the 80s, and it was like the one of the most, it was a had a little spooky theme to it, and the guy is singing on this, and you hear Michael Jackson singing background on this video on this song, and everybody's like, who the heck is Rockwell? Who is Rockwell? Why does it how does he get Michael Jackson to be on his album? Well, come to find out, Rockwell was Quincy Jones's son,
No, no,
and
no,
he
no.
put
That's Barry Gordy's son, but
oh, Barry
oh,
Gordy's
right,
son.
right.
But Quincy put it together for that. I was like, come on now.
Yeah.
Um, It's just amazing. He's an amazing dude. I mean, he is called the dude for the a specific reason. I mean, it's not just the name of the album. I mean, he was the dude before the album came out, but when he made the dude in 1981, it's just like he went into another stratosphere. And then after that, after the dude, he did The Color Purple. When I was in high school, I was assigned to do a music project, research as a composer, and I did Quincy Jones. And I remember my music instructor asked me, "Well, what does Quincy Jones say is his most favorite work? What he is most proud of?" And I'm like, "He's done too much." I said he can't. That's like picking one baby over another. Everything he's done has been fantastic. And I remember this was right after The Color Purple came out. I'm like, how do you pick? I mean, I would say The Color Purple is the greatest, but he didn't pick. I mean, it's it's just it was a ridiculous question, really, because there's just too much for him to say. I like this best," or this. Yeah, it's just crazy. It was crazy, and that was in 1985, and he didn't stop after that. After 1985, he started his production company. I
Right.
mean, he already had music locked down with Quest, but now he started production company, and he moved into television shows. We got the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air because of Quincy Jones. And so, I mean, he also did things like the Jenny Jones show, and Mad TV. All that was produced by Quincy Jones. And so, I mean, he started with music, but he evolved, and he even had Jesse Jackson host a talk show that I remember back. I can't remember the name of the talk show, but he did a talk show for Quincy Jones. And so it, I, the man was amazing. If you say icon is too light of a word to use, because this man, there's no comparison ever to the greatness of Quincy Jones. At 91 years old, he lived a full life and he enriched the world.
So, Charles, you see, I looked over because my bookcase is right behind me, and look what I found. Wait a minute, Charles, it gets better.
I don't signed. I need
See,
a certificate of I need a certificate of authenticity. Did you take a picture with him when that was signed?
I did. I was looking for the picture today, and I couldn't find it. It was so funny because he put the date in there. Man, Q is, it's funny. I tell this story all the time, and you know because you know me really well. I've met a lot of people, man, in the course of 3 decades of doing this. A lot of people. And I don't get shook for everybody. I really don't. I mean, they're people, right? But they're like three people. If I rolled up and I met them, and trust me, I met Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson was cool, but you don't get shook off of Janet. It's just Janet. Quincy, I
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. Speak for
sir,
yourself.
I got shook for Quincy. I was like, yo, because like when I met him, all the stuff that Quincy had done, man, it's like this dude, he is walking history, man. This guy, you swung with the Rat Pack, bro. Clarence Avant was Quincy Jones's best friend. And I told
Yeah.
you the other day, the fact that we lost Clarence Avant, I'm not sure what year it was because I don't think it was this year. But the fact that we've lost Clarence Avant and Quincy Jones now, those two people in general were responsible for so much of our culture, man. I mean, you use the phrase "nobody's irreplaceable," like everybody's replaceable. I don't know. Don't know. That's a legitimate question. But Quincy Jones, man, um, passed away on November the 3rd. He was 91 years old, man, at home with all his children around him, the way you're supposed to go. He had an aneurysm several, like maybe 20, 30 years earlier. But Q, man, God, man, this guy had like 7 kids with 5 different women. He was out there doing his thing, man. He's cute. Uh, you talked about him being the dude. That album, the dude, I was a senior in high school when that album dropped, man. You know, Velas and Bet You Wouldn't Hurt Me. Um, mm, mm.
100 Ways. You had I mean, I know Corita. It, just once. Come on now.
So,
Come on now.
so everybody from James Ingram to Stevie Wonder to Patty Austin, how do you pronounce the name? Sadeo?
Saida Garrett.
Aida
Saida
Gap.
Garrett.
Thank you. Wow. Ray Charles, I'll be good to you. Um,
Look,
that was
when
on Secret Garden. That was on, I mean, that was on Back on the Block. He did Back on the Block where he put,
right.
Ice-T, Big Daddy Kane, Ray Charles, a bunch of other folks on that album. So
Matter
kid,
of fact, after he did the Back on the Block album, he was on Saturday Night Live and he had like all those musical guests came on the Saturday Night Live with him. It was Tevin Campbell and Andre Crouch and Kool Moe Dee, Big Daddy Kane, Melly Mel. All of them came. Everybody that was because they had a song Back on the Block, and all of them were in that song. So they all did that song on Saturday Night Live, and I think it still holds the record for the most musical guests on the show ever.
so let's just get into it right now, man. Quincy Jones, man, as I said earlier, had 35 music scores, right? Starting in 1964. And I can't remember when his last one was, right? Again, young people at home, Google. But we're gonna look at his top 10 scores. And remember, man, Quincy Jones got 7 Oscar nominations and he won an Emmy for all of these scores that we're gonna go through. So we're gonna go through them in inverse order. Top 10 scores from Quincy Jones, man. Now, we talked earlier, that It's My Party was number one in 63. He had hits with the Brothers Johnson, Strawberry Letter 23. Michael Jackson, literally off the wall. We just named 3 albums: Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. Boom. And if you don't understand the impact of those, you don't understand music, right? Um, you just don't. And also, by the way, he also produced and did a score for this other little movie that was a remake of a 1939 film called The Wiz that introduced Michael Jackson as an actor. That starred Diana Ross, Ted Ross, and who am I leaving out? Oh, Scatman Crothers. And
Right.
it also featured a song by another young fledgling songwriter arranger that we're going to review his movie later on called Luther Vandross, who did a song called Brand New Day that was in The Wiz. So Quincy worked with Luther as well. Back to my point about Quincy Jones being like the Forrest Gump of the game, the Gump of the game, and being like a one of one, right? So let's go through the top 10 scores from Quincy Jones. Now, Charles, I was just listening to this before we came on the show because I was giving Charles some of Quincy's work. In 1977, there was a television miniseries that dropped. I was in the eighth grade, 77.
Mm.
This thing garnered 37 Emmy Awards and it revolutionized the limited miniseries art form in television. Project was called Roots, the Saga of an American Family, right? Oh, by the way, Quincy Jones did the score for that. And if you don't remember the score and you remember Roots, just remember all those times when you were watching Roots and then there was no dialogue and we had music that was pushing the story along. That was Quincy Jones. That
Yeah.
was his score. So, Charles, any thoughts on Roots, the Saga of an American Family?
It won him an Emmy for that one in 1977. Uh, a lot of people were wondering how Alex Haley was going to pull off this series, and I dare say that it wouldn't be the same. I mean, it's a great story and well acted, and it was pivotal in American history. Uh, but it was Quincy, and we felt him as we went through a lot. There were a lot of scenes where it was just like the music carried us through, and yeah, it was powerful.
Absolutely, man. Now, the next one on the list coming in at number 9 we'll talk a little bit later on about these darker dramas that he was scoring in the mid 60s. And then he took this next job to prevent from getting typecast as the guy that was always doing scores for these heavy dramas. So he did this
Mm.
movie, which I've seen, and didn't really pay attention to the music, but now I need to rewatch it. It was a movie of its time, a story about the introduction of swinging in Hollywood, right? Boom.
Oh, you're talking about Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice.
Thank you, Charles, for ruining it. I'm setting it up.
Oh, I'm
Bob,
sorry. I'm
Bob and
sorry. It's what
Cal, and Ted and Alice from 1969. Diane Cannon, God, what's her name? The two women, Diane Cannon, and I can't remember the other woman, but I know it was the guy from Ocean's 11, Robert Gould and
Elliot
Elliot
Gould,
Gould. I'm sorry, Elliot.
Natalie Wood, Robert
Bingo.
Culp. Yeah.
Yeah. So this movie earned 4 Oscar nominations, but none for Quincy for his jazzy of the era string laden score. I would recommend, I know how we always give out homework assignments on the show, man, like movies we would recommend. You got to check out Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, man. It is Charles. It is such a movie
Yeah.
this time. Like now, it was shocking in 1969. Like, wait, what? And then there's that great shot of all four of them in the bed together. All right.
I saw.
So,
Sorry, I
go-
didn't mean to step on your toes, but anytime you mention a movie and I start to understand where you're going, because we haven't talked about this before we started the show, so I'm just following along.
all right, sir. So in the future, as the setup is coming, if you know the answer, keep it to yourself. All
I'll do like
right,
this.
look. Coming in at number 8, this movie was remade later on by Mark Wahlberg, but the original, which came out in 1967, also featured a song that Charles discussed earlier called the Bossa Nova Soul. And that film was The Italian Job. And later on, to Charles's point, Austin Powers, man, they use that all the time. Na, 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 na. Wow, man, Quincy Jones, bro. Number 8, Charles. So you got anything on the Italian Job? Because what's interesting, um, I haven't watched that film in a minute, but am I right that Bossa Nova Soul plays during like some huge car scene that happens in this movie?
Yes, yes, during the car chase, and I mean, I think it's one of the best things about the movie. I really didn't like the I like the remake better than the original, but yeah, the music was what sets it aside. And like I said, everybody knows that song. Everybody knows that song.
All right, well that's good. Well, this is good. If you like that one, Charles, coming in at number 7 again. As we talk about the scores of Quincy Jones in these movies, man, always remember that music is an element in a film, just like when you talk about, hey, this is a character, the city is a character, the music is a character, so all that stuff. So these scores, like I heard you say earlier about Roots, that the movie had this and maybe it wouldn't be. No. The music is a central part of the story because it helps to move the story along. And that's important to know as we talk about Quincy scores and the impact that because these are some really good films, man. We start talking later on about the Pawnbroker and the Heat of the Night. It's not like he was doing this on some stank-a-dank movie. Well, there is a case to be made because we've talked about on the show that there's one movie that the soundtrack is better than the movie. And of course, I'm talking about Trouble Man, Marvin Gaye. The movie is awful. The soundtrack is great. So there is a case to be made that a soundtrack can eclipse a film, but in this case, I think his soundtracks are complementary. That they help the film, they kind of enhance the film as opposed to overshadowing the film. Now,
Right.
now coming in at number 7, Charles, Sam Peckinpah had a thriller in 1972 with a real life couple, Steve McQueen and Ali McGraw. And yes, Charles has the answer. With harmonica solos by Toots Thielsman and vocals by Don Elliott, Quincy Jones' score for The Getaway.
Mm.
Another amazing film which featured, some really good car scenes in it. It's not Bullet, but The Getaway is pretty sexy. Pretty sexy. Charles, go ahead. You had the answer.
Yeah, I was gonna say The Getaway. I think that was in 72,
No,
70.
The Getaway was 72. Yep.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, it's a great film. There was also a love song in the movie, but and I can't remember the name of it. But it was a really, I mean, you talk about orchestration that he did in that love song. It just made you. It just tied the whole thing together between McQueen and McGraw and their characters in the film. I can't remember their names, but I do remember that song, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Oh, absolutely, man. Now coming in number six, we talked about this earlier, man. The theme from Ironside, man, from the 1971 album Smackwater Jack. I actually like saying the title of the album. I think about Smackwater Jack. The Ironside theme, just when you think about it, it's from 1967, but it's just, it worked in Kill Bill. It just works. It's like who would come up with a concept where you go dun 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 dun, like, watch this again, Q. Thank you. So that came in at number six, which is used in Kill Bill. Charles, any thoughts on that before we move to number five?
I, you know, I barely remember Ironside, the show. I mean, I remember Raymond Burr was the star, but I remember that music.
Right? Who? Watch this. Who's Raymond Burr? Ironside. No, I know the song, but who is? No. All right, coming in at number four. I mean, excuse me, number five. I listened to this whole soundtrack, and there's a lead, the theme song. I forget the guy's name who sung it, but the pawnbroker. It was Quincy Jones's first score, and it was a story of a Holocaust survivor who opens up a pawn shop in New York and kind of like how he's emotionally shut down. Bruh, I'm not saying this is a situation where the soundtrack is way better than the movie because the movie's pretty good. But the movie really works because of the soundtrack. Quincy Jones put his foot in this. This is like a jazzy soundtrack for a Holocaust guy running a pawn shop. I mean, think about that for a
Okay.
second. Like making that, I mean, it's a brilliant soundtrack. If you get a chance, you should listen to it. The theme song, it's really, really good.
What's the name of the movie?
The Pawnbroker from 1964. It stars
Okay.
Rod Steiger.
Got me on that one. That's not,
No,
he
no,
got
no,
me.
no, that's what I'm here for, man. I'm your guide through all of this stuff. Coming in at number four, we already clowned it and said the Street Beater and You Got It Bad, and then he's got a song in there called Hickey Burr. All of that is on the Sanford and Son. Wow, that Street Beater song, man. Again, so funky. Like it works right now. Like if you were out someplace and you heard womp womp womp
Ba,
womp,
ba, 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 ba,
you'd be like,
ba.
wait, Sanford and Son, where's that? So yeah, that came in at number four. Number three, you
Oh,
talk.
oh, wait a
Oh, go
minute.
ahead.
Before you jump, you
Oh, go
mentioned
ahead.
Hickey Burr. Hickey Burr was from the Bill Cosby show.
Yeah, that
That
was a
that
Hickey Bird was yeah, that was. But I'm saying these were these show themes. We talked about Ironside, Stanford and Son. The 70s, 60s, and 70s was theme time. Like you had to have come and knock on my door. I mean, come on, man. The 70s are all themes. Welcome back. I mean, so there used to be a game we played. They used
okay, but those weren't his. Those weren't his.
none of those were his, but I'm just saying that was a time
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
60s and 70s that all shows had to have themes. We sort of got away from that. I don't think as much now, but that used to be a stable that if you were doing a show, the show had to have a theme, like coming in and out, right? So,
Game of Thrones.
oh, that's a great one. Well, wait a minute. 1985, we talked about this, and coming in number three, when you think about the color purple, It
Mhm.
literally is the music, right? Guys trying to tell you something. Miss Seeley's Blues, Sister, Quincy Jones. And in addition to doing the score, he actually produced the movie as well.
Yep.
Cat,
Yep.
this young woman who was a talk show host in Chicago that he believed in. You heard of her, Oprah Winfrey. All that stuff.
Yeah.
1980.
My,
Marvin
my
Gaye.
my biggest complaint about the new color purple is what they did with God is trying to tell you something, which was Quincy's from the original one. I mean, that song was powerful and it was powerful in the original, and they kind of diminished it in the second one.
Yeah, you must have heard me complaining because I was livid. I went to the screen and I was like,
That's all we get.
I told you the story. I was not happy. They was like, Tim, what's wrong? You didn't see the original. You don't really understand. All right. Coming in at number two, Charles, the Truman Capote did a book about quadruple murders in Kansas, and they went to Quincy Jones, and it's so funny here because they said Truman Capote had reservations about Quincy Jones scoring the movie. He said to the director, "I don't understand why you got a Negro doing the music for a film with no people of color in it." And the director told him, F you. He's doing the music. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And the rest is history. Why did you cast this black guy, this Negro, to do a movie with no people of color in it? It's the second best score that he did for a film called In Cold Blood from 1967, which, oh, by the way, was the second score he did that year because the film that the score that came in number one was the same year, In the Heat of the Night, that had Ray Charles. I played a song for Charles called Bow-Legged Polly uh, by Glenn Campbell, which
Jermaine Campbell.
is very catchy.
Yeah, it's very catchy, and the fact that I mean, it was just really it's a country song. It's a real down home country song.
Bow-Legged
Quincy,
Peggy and knock me call. They can't get together at all.
oh yeah,
Dude, man.
amazing, amazing how he could do that. Okay, number
So
one.
I'll just say this. So that was number one, man. So I'll just say this, man, in closing. Quincy Jones, man, he lived a great life, man. And I know sometimes we mourn when people are no longer in the presence with us, that we can't see them. And I know it's cliche to say that he's left us music that will live on past him. But my greatest, I think about the griot who talks about, every time, what is it? Every time a tree falls, man, when you lose a tree, you've lost like something that, is going to take generations to kind of replace. And, you heard me say earlier about Clarence Avant, who also was another huge tree. We've talked about Frankie Beverly. We talked about James Earl Jones. We've lost so many, man, guys that you and I grew up, man, watching their work, being entertained by them, dancing from the music they've created. And it's just the circle of life, man. But I'm so glad that we lived at a time, man, that we got to experience the magic of Quincy Jones. I mean, I just don't know how else to say it, man. Thank you for everything you did. Thank you for signing my book. Thank you for taking a picture, and thank you for Thriller and everything you've done, man. Everything. I just don't know how else to say it. Charles, I'll give you the last word on it. Any closing thoughts on Quincy Jones, man, before we move on?
The Dude is still one of my favorite albums of all time. It's just classic. It's one of those island albums. If you're trapped on an island, I gotta have the Dude. And yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, man. So Quincy Jones, man, 91, rest in power. Now you can get together, man, and you see Michael again, and you can see Clarence again. And man, God must have needed a conductor. I got to cut these albums. What's cute? So yeah, Quincy Jones, man. So all right, Charles. we're now gonna move into some movies, man, because we got some stuff we need to talk about this week, man. And before I get to those movies, let me just say that Charles, you didn't get an opportunity last week. We launched the WETA Cinema Classics, WETA Cinema Classics, and I introduced the general last week. I think I'm going to introduce, I think it's Godzilla King of the Monsters this week, and I'm going in to cut a couple more. But I really want people to check these out because Charles, did I send it to you yesterday? Did you get a chance to look at it?
No.
Okay, I could have swore I sent you. But yeah, you should check those out every Saturday here in the Washington metropolitan area from eight, I think 8 o'clock, and then a repeat at 9:30 p.m. WETA channel 26, our PBS station. Where there's a package of classic movies, and yours truly gets to present them every week. So I am very excited about the opportunity to stretch my wings and do something different. And Charles, I was asked, I think I told you the story earlier. I was asked to get in costume to do an introduction, and I was like, that'd be a no. Did I talk to you about that?
Yeah, you did. You did.
I was like, because first of all, I feel like I'm like if we're using a baseball analogy, I'm in the minor leagues right now, and I'm trying to get called up to the big leagues, TCM, and I'm trying to get called up, and you can't get there, man, if you putting on houndstooth hats and jackets and nah, can't you can't go out like that. That's not what we're about, Charles. So you got nothing else on that, man?
They- I would have loved to see your interpretation of Sherlock Holmes with the pipe and the hat.
I'm sure you would, because you probably would have took a picture of it and been like, I got you. I got you. All right, man. So we got a couple movies that we're gonna talk about today. Uh, at last, we're gonna talk about the Luther Vandross documentary, Never Too Much, because Charles and I saw this back in January and been waiting to talk about this. But we're gonna lead off today with a film from Oscar-winning director Steve McQueen, right? His latest film, which is hitting theaters this weekend, and oh, actually, it's not hitting theaters. I think it's hitting the streaming platform this weekend. Is called Blitz, which is a historical war drama written, produced, and directed by Steve McQueen. The film stars Saoirse Ronan, Harrison Dickinson, and Elliot Heffernan in his film debut, and it tells
Mm.
the story of a defiant young boy who goes on an adventure. I don't know if that's the way I would describe it, but he goes on an adventure in London during World War II, only to find himself in immense peril amidst the Blitz, while his distraught mother searches for him. Taking a break there for a second, Charles, because I'm pushing back on this description. I saw this movie, and so did you. Adventure? Is that what he had? I think it's more of a journey or an odyssey more than an adventure.
Yeah, yeah. Adventure means like kind of like well, I mean, he did kind of intentionally
Mm,
go on this journey. So I mean,
well, you heard me say journey or odyssey. I would not have used adventure. See, adventure to me sounds like it was lighthearted and fun, and what he went through was none of those things.
yeah.
So let me
Yeah, I
let
mean,
me
because
lead off
I
with
mean,
this
you
one.
think adventure, you think in Indiana Jones or something like that. Yeah, but no,
I don't know about an
not quite
adventure.
exactly. No.
Well, I wouldn't call it that. But let's talk about this film. So pretty much the film, the backdrop of the story, it takes place during 1940, and London is getting heavily bombed, or England, period, is getting heavily bombed by German forces, the Nazis, right? And they are, hitting these guys. It seems like every other night they're dropping bombs on England, right? And as the film begins, we see that there are facilities that they have, like usually subways or other places, movie theaters, they can get low. So when bombs come in, they can protect themselves. And in order to protect the youth, they decide to round up all the children and send them off so that they will be safe away from the bombing, which works well. until Saoirse Ronan's son, who's played, I think his name is George, played by Elliot Hefner,
Yes.
decides that he doesn't really understand why he's being sent off, and let's just say he jumps off of a train and decides that he's gonna come back home. No money, no food, no directions, Charles. Nothing. Go ahead.
I think it was more of the fact that he was a black boy going out to
Well, I
be
was
in the middle.
just,
Yeah,
he did it again. Step on me again.
it's not that he didn't understand why he wasn't going. It's that he just didn't want to be in that experience.
Right. And I buried that part. I was going to get to that, but Charles again being the eager beaver. Uh, he's of mixed race heritage, right? So father Jamaican, Saoirse Ronan Irish. She has this mixed race child. And to Charles's point, I think that adds another element to the story because when he's coming back, I believe his journey is a little different, Charles, if he's not mixed race, right? Because
Absolutely.
if he sort of fades in to like I mean, if he's like everybody else, he's sort of looked at as just like another kid. But by the fact that he's a little black kid, and then the thing that I thought was really interesting about it, and I'm not gonna I'm gonna stop at a certain point because I need to leave some to the imagination. But let's just say that he keeps encountering people, he keeps encountering adults, and there's some that are good and there's some that are not good. And he's too young to really distinguish between, people who are really trying to help him versus people who are trying to harm him. And I think that's the part that really adds tension, but it's also very sad when you talk about the loss of innocence, right? Like, this kid is like innocent, and all of a sudden you meeting adults and they want you to do stuff, or you're thinking that these adults are trying to help you, and then you finding out you getting tricked. It was a really internally, Charles, it was really a difficult movie to watch because you think about you got kids, or you think about your young nieces, your young nephews. You don't ever want anybody young to have the experiences this kid has to go through in this movie. And then on top of that, also add in this element of all this death around him with these bombs exploding and all these things that he has to do. I just think it's a really good concept of a screenplay, and I think it's a really good idea. And the fact that the movie made me at least feel some kind of way tells me that Steve McQueen was very effective in his storytelling. I thought it was a really good screenplay. It served as the opening night film I think we saw like a month ago at the Middleburg Film Fest. And it stuck with me, man, because you and I have not had a chance to talk about the film since we watched it. But I like Blitz, man. I really did. I thought it worked well, but all I could say is walking out that theater was that poor kid, man. He sees stuff at 9 years old that no 9-year-old kid should see, or experiences thing that no 9-year-old kid should experience. Charles?
It was a dark time, and he went through a dark experience. But I think we need to give credit to Elliot Heffernan. This was his first acting job ever. He was picked out of a process of photos and interviews. And he knocked it out of the park. He's a handsome little guy, uh, and he knew how to just get emotion communicate emotions in this film that you just was. I haven't seen adult actors to be this effective in communication and acting, and he carries a lot of the movie because I mean it's about his journey uh back to Saoirse Ronan, his mother Rita. But I mean, he does a fantastic job in this movie. I know that it's a combination of acting and direction, but it just worked in this film extremely well. Extremely well.
All right, man. So I'm giving this movie a B plus. I really like this story a lot. What about you, Charles?
I gave it a straight B. There were a couple things in there that just was infuriating. um, there were times, and I guess it might have been the point of the movie where at the very beginning, you're like this kid is stupid. And then and as you get through it, he's like, not stupid anymore, but okay. But yeah, all right. I gave it a straight B.
No, I got you, man. All right, man. So that movie opens up on Apple, I think, this weekend, and we highly recommend you check that one out. Now, up next is a movie that, as I said earlier, it premiered at Sundance, and we actually went to the premiere of this movie, and it's the story of one of my favorite pop stars, a guy I also had an opportunity to spend a couple of hours with one time, the Luther Vandross, and of course, the movie or the documentary is called Luther Vandross, Never Too Much, and it is directed by Dawn Porter, who Charles and I just saw at the Middleburg Film Fest last month, who sat in on one of the panels that I actually was a part of. And let me just cut to the chase on this film, man, because Luther Vandross, man, I mean, I want to spend some time, but I know we don't have a lot of time left to do this. But Never Too Much is a documentary written and directed by Dawn Porter, who also serves as executive producer. It chronicles the life and career of icon Luther Vandross, who died 20 years ago, back in 2005. The film follows Luther's nearly 40 years in the entertainment industry and highlights his career highs as well as his battles with negative media, focusing on his weight and sexuality. Footage from his performances and archive interviews, as well as interviews with his associates, are included. The film's subtitles are taken from one of Vandross's best songs, Never Too Much. Charles, let me lead here and say that Luther Vandross's first album, Never Too Much, dropped when I was a senior in high school, and I've been on Luther Vandross ever since, man.
Wow.
um for the 24, 25 years that he put music out. I remember um buying every album Luther put out in the 80s, man, watching his meteoric rise, his battle, as we talked about, with his weight. I had the golden opportunity one time. I think I shared the story with you, Charles, that I was working at a radio station and they sent me to New York for a tribute to Burt Bacharach, right? And
Hmm.
they had
Okay.
Dionne Warwick, Luther Vandross, Mike Myers, and Elvis Costello there, right? And I hung out on a sound check with Luther Vandross for like 2 hours, sitting next to him. We were laughing, cracking jokes. Luther had a great sense of humor, lots of fun, had a voice from God, like that voice. But I never understood him as a singer-songwriter, arranger. I knew he was a singer-songwriter. I know he was an arranger until I watched this documentary. The documentary is an hour and 45 minutes, Charles, and we'll cut to the chase. The first hour and 15, celebratory, right? You dancing and
Yeah.
the last
Yeah.
20 minutes of it, when the reality of what happens to Luther hits you, it's very somber, and then it's very uplifting in its final act, right? And as a bonus, Charles and I were there at the premiere. They brought up all of Luther's background singers who sang a medley of Luther Vandross songs, um, accompanied by, I think it was Fonzie Thornton on piano. And then we
Yeah.
the after party, and all the backup singers were there. So the fact that we haven't had an opportunity to review this movie since we saw it in January, let's just cut to the chase. A plus. I think it's one of the best documentaries. Now for me, right? It might not be an A plus for you. The, Watch this. All the songs, the story of Luther. I told Charles when I first saw it, I knew the whole story going in, and it still was great. It's still great. Charles, what did you think about Never Too Much?
I have mixed feelings about the film myself. I think it's an excellent film, but it just grates me for a reason that I'm not going to share on in this on this forum. But yeah, I agree with you. The film is fantastic, and it starts. I mean, gives you details about Luther Vandross that I'm sure not a lot of people really knew. And there's a parallel between you mentioned piece by piece. There's a parallel that a connection that Luther and Pharrell have about the creation of something that they both did for the same company, which was I thought was incredible because I did not know that Luther did that. And I mean, just from his early work with David Bowie all the way through to the end, it was just a fantastic piece of work. I love the experience, and maybe you're judging the film because of the experience that they wrapped around it. And you know how we talk about the festival bubble. I just gave it a straight A. I don't know about an A plus. I gave it a straight A. I thought it was, again, life change. You'll never hear Luther's music the same way after you've seen this film. It's just that powerful.
All right, I just want to double check for the record, man, because I'm looking at your review from January because you haven't seen it since. I'm like, did he give it an A? Hold on a second. Did you
Did I
give
give it an A?
You did. You are consistent. I would give you that much. Luther Vandross Never Too Much, man, opened earlier this week, man. If you go to the site, you will be able to see it and read Charles's review. I'm adjusting the date, Charles, to make it about today, so that folks can read your work because we know when we put it out in January, a lot of people didn't see it then, but you need to see it now, man. And it's on CNN Films. I'm not sure exactly how they're rolling this thing out, but it's a really good movie. It's a really good movie. All right, Charles. So I think we got to get out of here, man. We spent a lot of time talking about the great Quincy Jones today. We end talking about Luther Vandross and Blitz. So it was a good week for movies, man. Both these movies are superstar films. I would check them both out. I still think that this documentary is very different from Blitz, but Blitz is a really good film. So check them out. Charles, any last words for you before we get out?
No, I'm good. I can't wait to see Luther again. My wife has been waiting to see it again. So yeah.
All right, got you, man. All right, so we need to get out of here, and I hope that we were able to put some smiles on people's faces and take your mind off of these dark days in the Republic. But we will have more next week. We've got a bevy of new projects coming out that we're really excited to share with you. You know where we are every week. Come and check us out. And as we tell you every week, please see something good at the movies. We've given you a couple of recommendations, and then you guys take care of yourself, and we'll see you guys on the other side. Peace. You guys take care.